welcome to Locked On Indians. It is the Tuesday edition, so we have another special guest in the house. We have I would like to say my friend, Adam Liberman. We got to meet first when he was the Director of Public and Media Relations for the Akron RubberDucks. I almost said Arrows. I had that catch there. And you've heard me talk about him on the show many times. Very intelligent, a long history in baseball. I feel like we had some games that were not the most entertaining, where we spent at least 4 to 5 innings discussing deep level prospects, analytics, and approaches. It was always an entertaining time, even if the product wasn't the best on the field. Very knowledgeable. Started out with the Braves in the 90s, moved to, like I said, with the Indians. You've been with both those teams in various roles. You've been an official scorer. You've kind of seen it all. So it's, really interesting person. I'm just going to throw it to Adam so he can tell you his Twitter handle. I always end up messing those up. So I'm going to let, now that we've done the introduction, where can people find you? I'm
at aleebs18, ALEEBS18 on Twitter. As you mentioned, I do some fill-in official scoring. So if you hear Matt Underwood complain about one of my calls, or Tom Hamilton, I guess you can ask me about it, and I'll tell you what I thought. Fair enough. I have no issue hiding behind any of that. You did a pretty good job, Caps. I would say a little tweak, the Braves from 2000 to 09. So I got there, of course, after all the World Series, like literally right after all the World Series. I got there in 2000 for the All-Star game, and which most folks didn't realize till this year. 01 was the last playoff series they won before this year. So, but it was great time all the same. But and Arrows is fine as well. The first year we were there was when Ken Babby bought the team in 2013 season. Was my first year there of the 7, and it was the Arrows. So fair game all around.
You just have all those connections, and talking with you knew Glavine, you got to be around Andrew Jones. You have probably some of the best Andrew Jones stories in all of baseball from the time that so for me, I know you're not old enough to have been with them in the 90s, but in my mind, it's like you were there with the 90s guys post the 90s. You got to kind of experience some of that. And
it was crazy. It blew my mind. I'm getting there, and you see these guys. I mean, let's see, 91, the first year they did that was the worst of first. I was sophomore in high school. So, by the time I'm getting there, these are the guys I've been watching on TV. These are the guys, I kind of grew up with too. So, yeah, I'm not going to kid you. It was pretty cool and intimidating at first, for sure, to walk in that locker room. Who am I at that point?
But I always thought it was fun that you would talk about them, you still had contact with some of them. It may not be like you'd ever talk to them, but you got to know these players enough where I remember you talking about at one point in time, I won't say the pitcher's name, but there was a pitcher in the Indian system that you're like, I think he should talk to Glavine. I think they would really connect. You were talking about making that connection to even help get that pitcher more information. And it's things like that was like, wait a second, these, that was kind of some of my first mind blowing moments when I was in the press box with you.
I appreciate it. It's part of the cool part of the game, why we all kind of get into it. There's the long hours and the other grind part of the game, but some parts you can't beat, whether it's Jim Leland humming the chicken dance song behind you in the press box during a game, and in the Akron press box, or talking with Pete Vukovich, who is 1982 Cy Young winner, but who's also Clu Haywood in Major League, and just sharing stories. I mean, that's the part I kind of missed then in Akron, and even now, was the time in the dugout before games when Bobby Cox would hold court with the writers and other players and tell stories and go over that. And you just were a wallflower, just kind of sitting there in the corner, listening to all of it and taking it all in. And in some ways so surreal, because these people have done all these things that you watched on TV. You're supposed to play it straight, but when in 2000, the All-Star game came to Atlanta, I was my first year, my intern season. And at one point, and one of the days leading up to the All-Star game, I was sitting in the dugout, and on each side of me, I had Reggie Jackson and Frank Robinson. And at the time, I think they were somewhere around like 5th and 6th on the home run list. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's like 1,200 home runs next to me. How cool is this? But meanwhile, you have to keep cool. So we're all fans too, and so in some ways, having to keep that fandom down is one of the prices you have to pay, I guess.
Yeah, it was made me think of when Akron hosted the All-Star game. Obviously, we didn't have those level of names, but it was still the logistics of like you had to bring in risers into the press box to fit us all into that little press box to fit us all in there. And when we had the Celebrity All-Star game and just sitting in the press box or getting a chance to as someone who grew, I was in the 90s, baseball was my teenage years. So like when Carlos Baerga is sitting there, like shaking my hand when I ask him a question, it's hard to be like, okay, yeah, you can't, it's like, I know I'm never going to ask for an autograph. I'm never crossing that line. That is the line where you are no longer a journalist, but there's that level of you where you're like, okay, this is really cool.
Yeah. What happened, it changes as you get older and as you stay in the business. I always talk about it being seeing the wizard behind the curtain and it kind of losing a little bit of its luster that way. But, I still got a chance. I always talk about there was a time, one of the first times we went back, the Braves went back to Minnesota after the 91 series. One of the first couple times in interleague play. We had Smoltz on the team, and I was able to get John and Jack Morris to speak or to meet and talk, and they were talking in the hallway of the tunnel, and I kind of was in the staircase leading down to the field, not really eavesdropping, but kind of, and then really feeling like a little kid and thrilled I was able to set it up. And it was one of the first times I guess they'd spoken at length or spoken at all since that. And most folks didn't realize John was from the Detroit area. So Jack Morris, in a lot of ways, was his hero. And to be locked in that amazing Game 7 and that World Series, to go down the way that did, that was one of those moments. But as you get older, it changes. You get a different perspective on it. And there's what's cool for what you were able to do with Carlos Baerga, and I was able to do with some of the people I was able to meet on the tail end of my time in Atlanta, was those are the ones, since you're growing up, you have that fandom and that hero love for that you can't replace when you get older, and especially when you are sometimes twice their age.
Yeah, you definitely got to see it all. Basically, everyone who was on the Cleveland Indians roster who they didn't sign as a free agent or trade once they were in the majors, Adam has known. So that's a nice little bonus or way to transition is like going through so many names with the Indians. I mean, everyone on this roster, pretty much Adam's had some exposure to. I always talk about, before the show, I didn't mention one of the names I'm going to ask you about now.
Okay.
But I always tell the story about my experience with Shane Bieber in the minors and how I'm always going to root for the guy because I just remember him being quite possibly I don't want to say down to earth, but he was just like a please and thank you. Do you mind if I just seemed on paper in the 2 or 3 interviews I did with him or talking, one of the nicest human beings on earth. And I'm sure you probably what was it like? Because Shane Bieber wasn't there super long. He hit you guys, and that's when his star really kind of exploded. But the unanimous Cy Young Award winner, the first MLB Triple Crown pitcher in 50 plus years. What was your experiences like? Like I said, you guys caught him right as he was starting to get that wave of, I know I listed him as the number 2 prospect based on his half season in Akron that year. And I was still incorrect because I had him at 2 and not 1.
It's just a crazy story. So 17, he finishes up there and everyone had seen his walk rate and he pitched well. And so he was our opening day starter in 2018. And this is look where we're at now. So he's our opening day starter in 2018 coming out. And like you said, he just hit the ground running. I remember it was early season. He's a California guy, went to UC Santa Barbara. You're wondering how well he would pitch in that cold weather, move the ball in the zone. Would he be able to do that coming out of camp? And like the first game, I think he's threw 6 scoreless innings and just, hit the ground running. There was no holding him back at that point. And a year later, I mean, almost just barely over a year left after he left the Ducks, he's the AL All-Star Game MVP. And then a year later, he's winning the Cy Young and the Triple Crown, as you said. So he just was a real calm, chill guy, didn't let stuff rattle him, understood, I think, that big picture, that California chill. I always laughed at him and Clevenger. It would remind me of like one of those old 90s sports posters if you would have done it with them with surfboard standing there in like jam shorts with like a baseball glove and like the Indians hat in front of like a fire Corvette kind of on the the two dudes.
I can picture it. I can see
Yeah,
that old one.
easy going, chill, like really were great with the press and what we needed. Even though I knew it probably wasn't his favorite thing, he understood it was part of it. He understood the ups and downs of things, and really, sometimes that happens because guys go to college. It makes a difference sometimes. We saw some of the maturity not issues, I don't want to say, but maturity levels different. Some of those guys that went to Virginia, a couple of years were very mature that came out the Packers and the Pappies and the Will Roberts those guys were such great leaders and good guys in the clubhouse too. So, I don't know how much of that was him going to college, but Shane really knew what he was capable of doing, and he listened and he worked. And I mean, gosh, it's amazing what he's done. And with his personality, the Indians got one that they may be able to re-sign here and have on board to lead the staff for a while.
Hopefully, that's my number one hope for this offseason is they can somehow convince him to sign. You mentioned Virginia. Why don't I use that as a chance to talk about, for fans who are following the podcast and are curious about the Rule 5. When most of those guys, Nolan, Ernie, Eli, Ernie being another one of the Virginia guys. I'm trying to think who else. You wouldn't know Gabriel because they just traded for him, so no one got to really know him, and you wouldn't know Vargas never got up to AA. But those three, Morgan might be the most unassuming guy I've ever seen amongst players. I've told the story on the podcast. He's just, he's not a big guy. He has one of the best changeups in baseball, but I thought he was a clubhouse worker at first look. And then I saw him and you saw that he's built. Like, he is a strongly built guy, but just assume based on height. But yeah, if you, just spend a little bit of time talking about Nolan, Eli, and Ernie and your experiences with those three.
Very different personalities, all three. So yeah, Nolan is the big type A, go smiley guy in the clubhouse, leading the way, cheering guys on. I can't imagine anyone not wanting to be his teammate. A bit goofy, but he'll grow out of that. Challenge he'll have is what they decide to do with him on the field. Is I know they've been working with him in the outfield. He did okay at third. The issue he has, at being his size, he's a tall guy, 6'5", 6'6", trying to get the glove down quick on the hard hit balls down at his feet. But I was impressed by his arm, his accuracy from the position. I'm sure he can play a pretty good outfield. He's a good athlete. And I was impressed by how he sprayed the ball alley to alley really in Akron, and his plate discipline when he got to Akron, which I know a lot of people thought would be the case. He showed a lot of promise for a young guy coming up. It's not surprising he moved up the prospect list and that they protected him. And then Eli, like you said, the changeup's amazing. I think what Eli gets is, I think people underestimate him. I think, like you said, he's thick. He's stronger than people they'll see. He's been one of the things I think with Eli is he's very familiar with, like you see with some athletes who have athlete parents, like Patrick Mahomes or some of these others who are comfortable around the athletic scene. Eli's dad was involved in the sports media industry at its highest levels with USA Today and some of those. And I think Eli understands that kind of stuff. I think he doesn't want to get into the braggadocios or any kind of – so he's not his own cheerleader. And so, like you said, he doesn't jump out at you on the metrics, but he may be coming along at the right time for the Indians where they're trying to, cut some payroll, give some young guys a chance, see what they can do. And there's going to be an opportunity for some guys to seize that, and he can keep his pitch count down. And then the last one is Ernie. Now, Ernie's fiery. Ernie's got a lot of spear. Ernie's hilarious. Ernie's, I learned a lot about him as it went on. He's wicked funny. He's smart. He's very quick defensively, and in some ways almost too quick when he first got to Akron, like trying to get the ball almost out of his mitt too fast, but ahead of his footwork. But he's hit everywhere he's gone. if he can just same kind of thing as you see, you remember some of our conversation with Tyler Krieger is I'd like to see Ernie start, driving the ball a little bit better, but he'll get a little bit stronger. And as you see, AAA in the majors, the ball tends to go a little bit further. And, he's a solid position infielder that they'll be able to have minimum and a utility guy with the team they're going to have here, at least the next couple of years going forward. And, I'd rather a guy like that who they raise through their system that they know play than, someone else they sign for a free agent just to fill in for a year or two on, a 25th, 6th guy on the roster.
I'll also add in on Ernie Clement that when I was working on some prospect stuff last year when I was visiting my mom and my sister was there, that was the player. She goes, "Who's that?" Ernie Clement got the attention right away. That was the one that you.
Ernie's a funny guy, and I always remember he did this video in his car, a selfie of him about hitting bombs, and I think to that point in the year he'd hit none, and he'd been hurt, and he'd just come off the DL, and that night he hit a homer, and I don't think he hit another one for weeks after. So, just that kind of guy, funny, self-deprecating, good teammate, all of them good teammates, and we really. We had a shooting star too that came through in the 7 years I was in Akron, but none of those guys I can say made it to the majors. The Indians do such a good job finding character guys and finding guys that fit their mold. Even guys who wind up going to other organizations, Willie Castro or Eric Haas, really good guys. And then you see guys coming up the ladder, the Daniel Johnsons and those people now who, I'm definitely going to be rooting for.
Yeah, I want to give some credit to you as well. There are a few names that I wrote down that stood out to me as because I would always be because you're there every day. Yeah. You can Adam can attest to the fact that I was asking him about Zach Plesac a little and Cam Hill a little incessantly before anyone else was. Those were two guys that I talked about that I had a good feeling about. But Adam was a huge proponent of Pete Alonso, called him the best first baseman I think you had said you had seen in years. And this was before he was the Mets' top prospect. This was kind of at the beginning of his ascent. But you saw him, and he was one of those guys you were, I don't know if I'd ever heard you been that effusive about a player on another team over the course of the few years I was there.
He was the best hitter I saw to that point in my time in the Eastern League. That was when Tebow had just come to town, and everyone was there to watch Tebow and the Rumble Ponies, and Pete Alonso just destroyed us. And from foul pole to foul pole, every ball hard, every ball liner, it's very strange in baseball at the AA level or higher to have a situation where you feel the hitter is in charge or dictating the count to the pitcher, and I think that's how I felt. And he just raked them, and I think I tweeted something to that effect, is everyone here to see Tebow, but they should be watching Peter Alonso because this guy's just killing it. And just good for him. I know he wasn't their first baseman chosen to be at that point, and he just sees the job. You see what he can do, man. That kid is fun to watch. Sometimes you get right and you guess right. Other guys that impressed, some guys didn't. It was very underwhelming when his time in AA was Giolito. I think whatever he's figured out in his game, he's done that recently since he left AA, and he didn't really pop at that point. But then guys like Luis Severino was amazing. I think he struck 13, 14 RubberDucks out, and you just were like, okay, we don't need to see this guy anymore.
You'll probably remember the actual year off the top of your head. I'm not very good now at putting years to seasons, but I remember one time I showed up. Being a teacher, sometimes I have a late start. I wouldn't get there till June regularly for games, and I was like, boy, this roster, rough year for us. And you're like, slow down. Like, there's two names here that aren't on any lists, and you need to look. Like, it was only maybe a month and a half into the season, but you were already like, there are two guys here that are not top 10 anywhere, and you have to know. And those two were Clevenger and Yandy Diaz. And over the course of that summer, all of us in the press box slowly but surely fell in love with their potential and their talent. And, the rest of the world caught on to Clevenger quickly. But man, we had to Yandy basically until he left. We had to keep the hope alive there. But those two, like I said, it was a season where we didn't have high expectations. And I don't mean that to bash anyone who was there, but their top 10 prospects, I don't think there was any of the top 10 in AA to start that year.
I think maybe Eric Gonzalez was the highest rated guy to start the year that year. And he wasn't expected, not much was expected of Eric at that point. But I think everyone's infatuated with Yandy's muscles, let's be honest, that guy and his name and the stare, the whole deal. But I mean, I've never seen, and I think a lot of guys, the plate discipline that you have to start AA is the prospect weed out level, and to show up at AA and lead the league in on base percentage and walks. And I think he did it in AAA, and I think he did it, he did it like 3 different levels, but he did it the first year in AA, and that's just ridiculous. And I think he underrated. I think the Baseball America had him rated in one of the capacities at third base, and I always think he got undersold at the position there in Cleveland. But he, his whole big thing, the problem was Yandy was he always went out the other way. I think there's 2 ways of thought, I guess. There's people who have the game come to them, or the other way around. And sometimes you get guys when you get to AA and it's prospect level and they're 6'5", 230 pounds, and they think they're supposed to hit 20 homers at that point, start getting pull happy, start rolling over the ball, start getting into bad habits, and it could ruin them. Whereas Yandy, I think, wasn't going to compromise his game, which was fine. Sure, you're going to hit 320, but you may only hit a handful of homers, and that's what was going to delay his call up. And you see his size. Man, if he gave up 15, 20 points in average and be willing to swing with a little more launch angle, it'd be amazing what that guy can do. So I admittedly was bummed when the Indians traded him. I wish that guy they'd found a spot for him. And as far as Clev, I was bummed they traded him too, but I understand. Clev, the thing, just like with Bieber, not a lot of guys can attack the strike zone with movement and get misses in the strike zone. And those guys could do it, and is quirky. I mean, the guys, people saw the weird motion in the majors, but he had 2 or 3, 4 of those that he would try out while things were going well in the AA. Like I remember he had something going well, and he had some pretty good ERA at the time, and he started one game where he came out and he would pick his leg up and stop and then pitch like in the middle of his delivery. And I remember saying to him, I was like, most people change their game when things are going bad. Why would you change it when he's going good? And he said that they were working on a exercise in the bullpen about keeping his balance and weight back. And it was similar to that. And he liked the way it felt as pitching. He decided to take out to the mound, and he did pretty well, and had a handful of starts that way. And then some where he was rocking, and you could just see the movement in the arm. And, but that said, he had arm issues with the Angels. He's had arm issues now. And I think a lot of people don't understand when they hear that 10% failure rate when it comes to Tommy John surgery, it doesn't mean that they're not able to fix the arm or the person can't pitch again. It means that person probably will need it a second or time or more, that they're really not able to make it work. And my concern with Clev is that his stuff may have been too good for his elbow. It's like John Smoltz's forkball and his elbow that ripped it up. And he had the couple surgeries at Dr. Andrews. I think he has basically a wing there at Dr. Andrews' office, or even a Kerry Wood, and what it did to his elbow. And when you have strange mechanics and the ball moves all over, while your youth is there and your health is there, you can do some stuff. But it'll be interesting to see if he comes back as the same pitcher long term.
Yeah, I just to go back to something, I remember something that stood out with Yandy, and this is probably something you would appreciate doing media relations. When you're in AA, you're not necessarily the biggest media. We're a lot of blogs and subsites, and some players, very rarely, but there are some who definitely do not want to give us the time of day. And for someone like Yandy, who had a language barrier, I don't think he ever once turned down or said no to it. Like he would go find, like if you were busy, he'd be the guy who would go get a translator for himself. Like he's like, this is part of being a professional. I need to do this. And he would, Nelly Rodriguez, to give him a shout out, helped a lot that year because you wanted to talk with Yandy often, but Nelly was great with that. But I always just appreciated, like, I understand I am not working for a big paper, but I always appreciated the level of professionalism that Yandy had in those moments.
There's guys who embrace that. They know that's part of it. And if they want to be where they want to, be a celebrity or star player or with the team, that's just the reality of it. They do. Thankfully now Major League Baseball has interpreters at the major league level for Spanish speakers, and the Indians do a great job with the classes. But Yandy, just like Jose Ramirez, were non-existent English. I mean, it wasn't there at all. And he was very friendly, but I did appreciate the effort, and not everyone's going to do that and want to do that. I guess it helps when you have a good game. Sometimes guys aren't going to want to do it when they don't, or if they don't pitch well and they don't speak English, they may not want to. But it shows the character. It's a long season, and it's a maturing process for all those guys, especially Double A. And the most challenging one, which thankfully technology had come in, that was with Yu Chang. I was able to use Google Translate a couple times where I was able to write something out and translate it into Thai and have him read it and be able to give me a response and be able to engage with him and do some stuff. And that actually was really, really cool, from something when I was in Atlanta that would never have been the case. And in a lot of ways, it's a big regret not learning Spanish, because there was people there the whole time, or a lot of the time, who you don't really get to know on more than a very cursory level.
Before I let you go here, as I've already held you for over 20 minutes that I promised, but I always like to get maybe normally I'd say a sleeper prospect, but I feel like you probably know all the, we kind of know all the prospects that you've got to see since we're 2 years out. So I guess the question instead becomes, like, who is a favorite prospect who maybe didn't hit, and who is a prospect now that you're kind of pulling for maybe a little bit more? I guess, is there a player who really made an impact who still won in the minors, or is there a prospect who you're like, he had everything together, I don't know what happened?
There's guys who come in with the physical skills who don't make it. There's guys who work hard and overcome a lot of things who don't make it. The guy I'm rooting for, who's still currently going for it, and hopefully he gets a chance with the way the Indians are going, and I don't see why not, is Kai Tom. He's a great athlete. I hope people don't sell him short. Most folks don't realize he was Marcus Mariotta's backup quarterback in high school in Hawaii.
I didn't know that.
And the guy's an amazing athlete, and he does. A lot of times with those small guys, they typecast him as Ollie Linton or Lance Johnson, and he is not that. And he absolutely has more pop, and absolutely, I think, could make it as a third or fourth outfielder on a team. There's no reason with the Indians' power out there and what they're trying to do in the outfield that he couldn't get some time up there this year. And I would love to see what he can do. I root for that guy. Always wish Joe Sever would have got a shot. There's not really a better guy, a better leader that we had. To watch that guy evolve. He played a poor third base, came back to camp the next year, had volunteered to be catcher, to try to catch in spring training and put on the tools of ignorance and try to make himself more multidimensional. And he came to camp and played a lot of third that year and was fantastic with the RubberDucks. He played great third, maybe one of the best third base seasons we had there, and hit and made the All-Star team that year. But Joe maximized everything out of his talent. And when you get to certain organizations that are in their window, you're not going to get some of those chances, and that happens, in different teams. Whether it's Todd Betts being behind Jim Thome and Travis Fryman at third base back in the Arrows days in the mid '90s, or whether it's Clint Frazier trying to get through with the Yankees right now. Sometimes it's opportunity, sometimes it's bad timing with guys. There's guys who, Tristan McKenzie, I'm rooting for Tristan. Tristan's as good of a guy, he's absolutely everything the Indians would want. He's a good guy. He's funny. He's personable. He's marketable. He'd be great for the community relations department and a great teammate. Those are the people I'm rooting for. They do a great job of having them there. Don't overlook. We only saw him briefly with in Akron, but the Scott Moss.
The
The
lefty.
I'm interested to see what he can do. I think he's one of those guys who, like Clevenger and some of the others, have come to the Indian system where the Indians had some things they identified in him and wanted him to work on. And I think you'll see some improvement from where he was. And I think he's got a shot, especially as we were saying, like where other guys are going to get some chances. I think he's got a shot to make a difference too, just like Eli.
Yeah, that depth it's a nice thing to have. There was those times in the early 2010s where the 6th or 7th starter was not necessarily even known. Like, I can't remember who they traded for, but I remember they bought someone who never pitched in the big leagues, but they bought someone to pitch in AAA. Like,
most years growing up, I wish they had a 4 starter, let alone 6 or 7.
It's a nice situation to definitely have. We could obviously go on for like another hour. I feel like easily. We've barely scratched the surface. I will be sure to have Adam on the show again at some point, but I don't want to monopolize all of his time this evening. And it is a long off season, which gives us plenty of opportunities for me to bother you again to come on. But again, thank you very much. Let them know again here at the end of the conversation after our talk here, where they can find you again on Twitter.
Sure. I'm at Aleebs, ALEEBS 18, Aleebs 18 on Twitter.
Again, thank you for being my guest this week on the WKYC Cleveland Locked On Indians podcast. Like I said, Adam is a great follow, very, very full of information. You're not going to regret it. Thank you all for listening. And as always, go Tribe.